Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode here on the Sitrep podcast. I am your host, as always, Oriskany Jim, and today we're going to take what at least I feel, or at least to me, it's a first look. I know other people have been playing this for a while, but this is the first time it's been recommended to me, the first time I've actually bought the book, the first time I haven't read this book yet, but I have skimmed through it. We're going to go over some of the highlights here in today's live stream. And this is basically Oriskany's first look, or my first look at a great, what seems to be, it's been highly recommended to me by a guy I trust. 7 Days to the River Rhine, not to be confused with 7 Days to the Rhine. That's an operational scale game, hex encounters. That's a totally different beast. Another great game, put out by Strategy and Tactics Press. Amazing game, but a completely different animal than this. Very similar name, pretty much the same setting. 1980s, everyone wants to invade Germany. But this is obviously a tabletop miniatures game, and it's totally different than 7 Days to the Rhine. This is 7 Days to the River Rhine by Great Escape Games. So, Wardrobe Plays World War II has joined us. Thanks very much. He says in the chat, this has some mechanics, some better wording than Iron Cross. Oh, okay, cool. Meant to say it has some nice mechanics. Yeah, like I said, full disclosure, I haven't tried this game yet, and I haven't fully read the rulebook yet. But there's two things that really make this promising to me. You guys know me. If you watch my channel, most modern rule sets, by that I mean most recent rule sets, most rule sets that have come out since like 1985. I'm usually one of the first guys to go. Somebody else already did this better, guys. This is. I'll stick with Panzer Leader. I'll stick with GHQ Micro Armor. I'll stick with XYZ games that have been around since the 80s, the 70s, in some cases even the 60s. Because modern rule sets, I think, are just getting too light, too 90 minutes or less, too Kickstartery, if that's a word, too beer and pretzels. However, again, on first look, I haven't played the game yet. I haven't even fully read the rulebook. 7 Days to the River Rhine seems like a really good fit, at least for me, on a number of levels. I'll go over that briefly here in the chat in just a second. That's the first reason I'm kind of excited to try it. The second reason is it's highly recommended to me by Piotr. So Piotr's tried it a couple times now. He's only played, I think, once or twice so far. But so far, he likes what he sees. And Piotr's a guy who definitely knows what he's talking about. When I went and recruited him into Sitrep Podcast, I chose wisely, as they say in the movie. We had gamed a bunch before. He'd been on the Sitrep Podcast. He'd been a contributing content creator for a while. So I've known him for since 2014. So I've known him for going on 10 years now. He's a guy who knows his shit. Not to put it, there's a lot of people who just like get into the hobby for fun. He knows it as a military veteran. I mean, everybody on the Sitrep Podcast is a veteran in one way or another on the Sitrep Podcast team. So, like the rest of us, he's a veteran. So he knows how the military is set up. He knows how orders work. He knows how units are put together. He knows how shit really works and doesn't work in the military. His job as a historical archivist at a university, yeah, he knows his stuff. And we've played a lot of games before. Again, he plays Panzer Leader with me. We've done Valorant Victory before. He suggested and helped me design scenarios from everywhere from Monte Cassino to Dien Bien Phu and everywhere in between. So we have like a similar mindset when it comes to a lot of games. We don't agree 100%. I mean, I've never tried Infinity. He's a big Infinity fan. But more or less, we have sort of the same, we look for a lot of the same things in games. So I have a lot of friends who are smart, knowledgeable. They play a lot of war games. And when they say, Oriskany, you need to try this war game, I'm like, yeah, but you play game XYZ. And nothing wrong with those games, but they're just not really my cup of tea. Me and Piotr play a lot of the same kind of games. So my ears kind of went up automatically when he said that he wanted me to take a look at this. So I bought the game last night via PDF, took a look at it. And again, I haven't read it cover to cover yet because work, and it's only been like I've only owned the game like 28 hours so far, and in between there was a night of sleep, sort of, and a work day, so I haven't had a chance to take a look at it in full detail. But I've gone through it, and yeah, so far I like what I see. So, awesome. Jennifer Levin says he knows a guy. I know a guy who knows a guy. Forget about it. Wardrobe plays World War II also adds, I play more of Iron Cross just because it's way more, or it is more my jam. I've never tried it. I have heard of it, but awesome. It's very abstracted stuff in here, but I'm good with that. Yeah, I grew up in strategic and operational war games, so abstraction has never been a problem for me if it's well designed. And there's a few things I think I know what you're talking about in here, and by all means, add some more comments as we go through some stuff in the rulebook. I'm not going to show the whole rulebook. I'm not going to even show you pages from the rulebook. I'm going to show you like little paragraphs and pictures here and there. I don't want to give away someone else's product. The game is available at Great Escape Games. It's very reasonable on PDF. It was like £9, so like $10, 50 cents for me. It was, it definitely seems like a good system. So one more thing before we get into this, super fast. By no means do I want this to sound like, and if it comes out like this anywhere near, anywhere through the upcoming live stream, I apologize in advance. I do not mean it this way. I do not want this to sound like, or be construed or misconstrued as some kind of hit piece about Team Yankee. This is pretty much like an alternative to Team Yankee that is going to emphasize different aspects of the battlefield and different kinds of war games, different things that different people prioritize. Like if you want a gigantic, like 2-company plus, like a NATO company versus a Warsaw Pact battalion on a huge like 8 by 10 foot table, this probably isn't the game for you. Stick with Team Yankee. However, if you want just a little bit more, I won't say historical accuracy, because let's face it, if we are going by historical accuracy, this game gets a 0. Because this war never happened, clearly. However, there are things besides historical accuracy. There's technical accuracy, how these weapon systems work, and more importantly, how these units work. War is not fought, despite what they say in the movies and what we say on Veterans Day. War is not fought by heroes. War is not fought by individuals. War is fought by teams. War is a social art. So it's how these units work, how these systems work, and how they all work together. So we'll see how that goes. It's also a little bit of a smaller scope. So by that I mean like your average game, it seems like, at least from what I hear from Piotr, again I haven't tried the game yet myself, but from what I'm hearing from people who have tried this game, this is usually like, 3 vehicles versus 5 with a good amount of infantry thrown in there. You won't see the 10 versus 20 or 15 versus 30 vehicle Team Yankee sort of parking lots that you see in other systems. So with all that said, and with one last footnote, this is a first look. Again, not meant to be a game review. I haven't tried it yet. It wouldn't be fair to have it be a review, even if I like the game or even if I don't like the game. Because again, I haven't tried it yet. I'm not going to review a game I haven't tried. So this is just a first look kind of thing. Hello, Walkabout Games. How you doing? Awesome. Cool. So we got a pretty good audience for today. All right. So again, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Super fast. All right, so this is the cover to the game. Nice. All right, so the first thing I want to say about the game is, number one, it is lavishly illustrated. It seems to be, a great book. Interestingly, I feel all the miniature photos in the book, or almost all the miniature photos in the book, are Battlefront Miniatures. So this is why I'm really excited to at least try 7 Days to the Rhine, or 7 Days to the River Rhine, I should say, is because I've got tons of Battlefront miniatures. Whether you love Team Yankee the system or hate Team Yankee the system, or you're somewhere in the middle with Team Yankee the system, kind of where I am, to be honest. One thing you can't argue about is the miniatures are friggin' epic. and I've got a huge collection. I think I've got like 40 or 50 Soviet vehicles, aircraft. I've got 6 Heinz, 17 T-72s, 10 BMPs of both kinds, 1 and 2, at least 3 or maybe 5 PT-76s, 2 Shilkas. No, actually, 4 Shilkas. I got 2 Soviets and 2 in Iraqi colors. You name it. I got BTR-60s, I got T-55s out the wazoo. Because you could never have enough T-55s, let's face it. I've got tons of miniatures, and that's just my Warsaw Pact stuff. Then I've got a whole West German force, and I've got a whole American force. Technically 2 American forces. 1 U.S. Army, 1 U.S. Marine Corps. They are all in desert colors for Operation Desert Storm Project, 30th anniversary we did about a year and change ago. So I've got tons of miniatures, and I don't really have the best system to play them with. Battle Group, my Plastic Soldier Company, is probably my favorite game. My favorite miniatures, World War II game. Let me quickly add that in there. Panzer is my favorite game, obviously. But World War II miniatures game is definitely Battlefront. I don't know if it would work with modern stuff. We've pushed it as far with our own little kit-bashed rules and so on, as far as 1991 Gulf War. And even then, we were doing certain battles and not other battles because too much electronics, too much ordnance, like guided ordnance, too much anti-tank guided weapons, too many missiles, too many helicopters. Battle group starts to break down. I would be afraid to try it. I've taken it and sort of kit bashed a couple rules here and there, and done U.S. Marine Corps versus Iraqi Army, because U.S. Marine Corps didn't have the latest M1A1 battle tanks, really. I think they had like 1 company's worth, but by and large, they didn't have those in 1991. They didn't have a whole lot of TOW missiles. They had some on their LAVs and such. And they were up against Iraqi Army, not Republican Guard. So no BMP-2s and no T-72s, or Lions of Babylon, whatever you want to call them. These were all like T-55s. So T-55s versus M60s, you can kind of get away with by taking, Fall of the Reich, the most chronologically advanced book I think they've come out with so far for Battle Group. And we had fun. Whether or not it's really sustainable, who knows, because we did have to add a lot, clearly. But for full scale, this was designed for this setting, 1980s, maybe 1990s if you wanted to push it. You just have to add some new stuff to the order of battle cards that they give you in the book. It would be pretty easy. So I've got the Battlefront miniatures. I've got literally dozens of them just for modern sport, probably more like over 100. If you include infantry, probably well over 200 miniatures for this setting. But the system I've been having, the system I've been going to play with, Team Yankee is sort of a mixed bag for me, personally. The Battle Group can only stretch it so far. It's a World War II game, let's be honest. And I've been waiting for Centag. Northag is great by Plastic Soldier Company, all the same writers as did for Battle Group. It looks amazing. I've got the book on PDF. It looks great. But it's a 10mm game. It's like battalion plus size. I'm talking about a nice little skirmish plus tank, kind of a dust-up game, tank and infantry, combined arms. Not quite skirmish, but not quite like full battle game. Long story short, I feel that 7 Days to the River Rhine might be the Battle Group in the same way that Battle Group is to Flames of War for World War II. So we'll see how it goes. I should say that these are a derivative of the Iron Cross, the World War II version. Oh, okay, cool. Like I said, I've heard of Iron Cross. I've just never tried it. But let's go ahead and get into it. So I'm sorry, before I move off this little image here, what I wanted to say is I don't know what the deal is. I'm certainly not privy to this kind of information. But it seems like this was a project that was made in conjunction with Battle Group. So, again, it's going to draw a lot of comparison to Team Yankee. It does some things, I can tell you already. Again, I haven't played the game, but I can tell you already, it does some things better than Team Yankee. Straight out. Other things, maybe not so much. I think it's going to come down to what you like in a tabletop game. And I don't think that the two are, it doesn't seem like they're in any kind of direct competition, bad terms, anything like that. Because again, the entire book is illustrated by Battlefront, effectively. So another thing that you get throughout the book are these little hint cards that they give you. They're not rules. They're just hey, look, as you try the game the first couple of times, these are little hints, tricks, tactics, pro tips. I will say that there are at least 4 or 5 from Sergeant Bradford there, and only 1 for Senior Lieutenant Vasilov. So already I am detecting strong Yankee imperialist propaganda in this book. That's one thing. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, just like little hints to help you get started. And there's these little QR codes that you can scan, and they immediately take you to these little YouTube videos or whatever that like show an actual tabletop and say, hey, like this is how this particular section of the rules works in a real life example. So I thought that was pretty cool. Alright, so we get into the sequence of play, which again, viewers of the channel or people who have watched me in the past, people familiar with my work, I'll be the first to say, and I live by this. The secret sauce of any game is in the turn sequence. If your turn sequence is clear and resolute and resilient, and there's not a lot of ambiguity or screw-ups or loopholes in your turn sequence, and your turn sequence makes sense, you're going to have a good game design. You're literally halfway there already. So one thing that I like about this, or I think I will like about 7 Days to the River Rhine, is that it doesn't seem to be you go, I go. The second I saw create a pool of command tokens, and then I'm like, oh, please tell me you don't put dice in a bag, and you start throwing dice out of the bag. No, it's not like that. These are like command points, and the number of command points you have depends on what force you have on the table, what the status of your commanders are like, maybe some special scenario rules. We'll get into that later. But then what you do is, okay, you roll for initiative. Whoever's initiative can either go first or make the other guy go first. Whoever is actually moving now plays a token on a unit. That unit now moves and does all its things. The enemy can try to interrupt if he has line of sight on you before you go, line of sight on the movement on the unit that you just activated. I won't go into the whole rules because again I haven't played the game and that's not the point. This isn't a review. But the rule system, or I should say the turn sequence, seems to be very fluid. There's a lot of interruption, and at any time, it seems, you see over here on Rule 2 on the right hand side, anytime the active player can just say, you know what, I'm done for now, you go. And then the other guy has to spend at least 1 token, and then, no, okay, now you go. In a lot of these old school 1980s games that me and my friends and my brother and other people used to play, that was the reason you won initiative. Not to go first, to make the other poor bastard go first. You never want to be the guy that goes first in these high firepower games. So there seems to be a lot of fluidity with the turn sequence and the way that units activate. So I'm very excited about that. All right, now units get grouped into very kind of quick, rough and ready sort of brackets or categories. Infantry teams, support teams, light vehicles, main battle tanks. And helicopters, which I don't have here, but pretty much that's it. With the exception of helicopters and maybe offboard artillery, the meat and potatoes of your force is really going to come down to 4 unit types. That might seem a little simplistic to some people. I don't think it will be. The only one that gets a little weird, or could get a little weird, are light vehicles. Because it puts tracked APCs, wheeled APCs, light APCs, light IFVs. I'm assuming light anti-tank vehicles, anti-tank mortars, LAVs with the ITV tow boom on top of who knows what. They're going to get all kind of jumbled together there. I don't think it's going to be a problem, and I'll show you why in a later chart. But yeah, some players might get a little put off by that, but again, I don't think it's going to be an issue. One thing I definitely did like, one thing I did look for, whenever you're playing really anything involving the Soviet Union or armies built on Soviet templates or sort of like Soviet client states, you gotta have some kind of command system. that really highlights the difference between a Warsaw Pact model command structure and a NATO structure. There are reasons why these, I'll just call it First and Second World, why these First World and Second World forces organize very differently. It has to do with who joins the army and how the armies are built, how the armies are paid for, and the countries that these armies come from, and like what the average education level is like, whether they're volunteers or conscripts or things like that. And it's a thing, and it's a huge difference. So any game that sort of just says, okay, the Soviet units are cheaper, but there's more of them, good luck. And not really going into why. It's not that their equipment is that much worse than ours. It really isn't. I mean, it's worse than ours, but it's not that much worse than ours. The real secret sauce is in your lower command levels, your NCOs and your junior officers. So your staff NCOs, platoon leaders, company commanders, stuff like that. One thing I also liked, actually, let me check the comments here before we get into it here. Oh wow, we got a bunch of comments. Okay, cool. Wow, let me get caught up here. So Jennifer Lemon says that is most of what I see in your display case. Actually, most of what's in my display case is World War II. But give me 1 second here. Most of what's in my display case is World War II. So that's great for Battle Group and Flames of War, especially 4th edition, but really Battle Group. Let's be real. However, all that said, there about maybe a third of it is modern. By modern, I mean 1960s forward, not like 5 minutes into the future modern. So yeah, there's been a big chunk of my collection I haven't really been able to use yet, including at least 3 whole armies. So Walkabout Games says the author is a friendly guy, always willing to answer questions on Facebook for 7 days. Yeah, I heard it's got a great Facebook group. That's something else that Pio was mentioning to me. He was talking about how, in addition to the order of battle charts that we'll get into here in a little bit, there's a lot of other groups that they're putting together. Israelis, Syrians, Iraqis, Egyptians, stuff like that. I haven't seen any of it yet, but I'm reliably informed that it's out there, which is huge news for me. I do have a huge Iraqi force, mostly for 1991 Gulf War. It can be very quickly converted to either Egyptians or Syrians in 1973. That's going to take like that, because I don't really have any T-72s for it. That's about the only real difference you'd have to do. And I even have some Israeli M48A2s. Yes, M48A2s for 1967. So, and hey, that would be more miniatures that I can buy and build, because, spoiler alert, in case you guys don't know me, Arab-Israeli Wars. Look at this box. This box is older than most of you, okay? I've been playing Arab-Israeli Wars. I shouldn't say that. I have no idea how old everybody is, but I'm a massive fan of the Arab-Israeli conflicts as a historian or as a wargamer in general. So again, that's another thing I'm very excited to try out here with 7 days. So the models are all painted and the tables look good. There are good play videos on this game as well. Awesome. Cool. So yeah, Walkabout Games goes on and says that 7 days is good for smaller scales. Yeah, so that's something else I should mention real quick. It sounds like you guys probably know more about this game than I do, but for people who might be watching this later on YouTube, 7 Days to the River Rhine is scale agnostic. It seems to be made primarily, or at least the people who wrote the game, tend to game primarily in 15mm, but doesn't have to be like that. You don't have to stick with 15mm at all. I'm a huge fan, as everyone who watches the channel might know, in taking a game that was originally written for 28mm and playing it in 20 or 15, or taking the game in 15 and playing it in 10. What I'm really interested in is that the battles themselves seem to be smaller. So that's like smaller number of vehicles, smaller number of units. Definitely interested in that. Um, that's what he needs. He has Panzer Leader for the large scale. Yeah, man. Panzer Leader is the shit until you get down to like tiny little battles for sure. So Sentag is probably in September, Jim. That'd be cool. I know the system is great because I've got the book for Northag, and I know the people that created Battle Group. I'm sorry, Northag are pretty much the same design, playtesting, and team, the same game creation team that created Battle Group. And Battle Group is just, it is not my favorite war game, full stop. It's my favorite miniature game. I'll say that, unqualified. Hello, Springtime. How you doing? Is the game based on the Soviet? Oh, is the game based on the Soviet war plan? It does give you orders of battle that you can use, but it also just gives you lists. Honestly, the game is so small in command level, I don't think it's got any actual NATO or Warsaw Pact war planning in it. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by war plan. It does break things out into category 1, 2, and 3 divisions. It does break out the Warsaw Pact forces into the kind of stuff that they had, as opposed to the Soviets have, and all the very, very important differences thereof. So in that level, but again, you're probably playing a senior lieutenant tops, and even that's going to be a stretch if you're on the Warsaw Pact side. In other words, a company minus, maybe up against a NATO platoon. Most Team Yankee, again, it all depends on how many points you put in the game, so I don't want to paint the game with a broad brush. Most Team Yankee games, or at least tables I've seen, tend to be roughly NATO company plus versus a Warsaw Pact battalion plus, and depending on, I know what those terms really mean. I know most of you guys know what those terms really mean. Not every player who plays Team Yankee knows what those terms really mean. But if you did actually go by the real force levels, that right there, I just named like 40 or 50 vehicles. Easy. That's if they had already taken combat losses or road losses on the side of the road from mechanical breakdowns and other stuff. Normal field attrition. Good grief. A Soviet tank battalion at parade ground strength, 31 vehicles. 3 platoons of 3 per company, plus a company commander, times 3 for 3 companies, and a battalion commander, you end up with 31. An American team is at least 14 vehicles, maybe more if it's a mech team. A lot of times mech teams are based around mech platoons, which, because the Bradley is a hump of shit and doesn't carry enough troops, there's often 5 tracks in a Bradley troop or a Bradley platoon when it should be 4. I've seen in Desert Storm, we saw some of those cavalry troops up to 6 tracks. And if you have a mech team, so you have 2 troops or 2 platoons of mech, that's right there is 12 vehicles. Plus an XO, plus a CO, you're up to 14 already. Then you drop a platoon of tanks on top of that, 16 tanks. You put one company up against a Soviet actual battalion, 31, 47 tanks on the table. That's great if you're playing 12 feet by 10 feet, or like little mechanical grabbers to move your vehicles to the center of the table. But don't get me wrong, I would love to play that game, but my dining room won't handle it. My dining room only can go to 6x4, so I need a game like this that plays on smaller battles. Oh, the Soviets had a plan in 1979 of the same name. Okay. I do have some of the maps. I don't know how many days they were talking about. Sounds about right, though. World War III in Europe has them reaching roughly the Rhine in 8 or 9, 10 days. The war goes from like August 5th to August 15th. In Red Army by Ralph Peters, they don't reach the Rhine, but they're pretty much already there by the end of day 3. So, I don't know if they would have reached the entire River Rhine in 7 days. Maybe in the north, where the terrain is much more open. but it'd be tough to say if they would reach that same general phase line within a week in the southern part of the battlefield. Again, I'm not trying to say that the Americans are better than the British or anything like that, but you've got a lot more terrain in the south. A lot more terrain in the south. And also you got to remember how the intra-German border was shaped. It actually swung a lot more out to the east in the south, so the Soviets would also have further to go in the south. Never mind the terrain they were actually crossing. I've seen a lot of Soviet war plans. I've got some of the actual JPEGs, ominously with little mushroom clouds, little atomic bomb markers over all the North Sea ports. So we know it's on YouTube. It's on Google. If you just search them hard enough, you'll eventually find it. It's not like I went to the dark web or anything for this. You see where all the North Sea ports were, like the first 20 minutes of the war. Wilhelmshaven, Bremerhaven, Antwerp, Ostend, all those ports up and down the Dutch coast and North German coast. Bye. Because they wanted to cut off the reforger reinforcements coming into northern Germany from the UK and the United States. Okay, so back to the game overview super fast. We have a look at what the actions are. One thing I did notice, and it kind of raised my eyebrow a little bit, you do have a shoot and move. You have a rapid move, which is basically double move. And you have a move and fire or a fire and move. You know, whatever. They don't have a double fire move like Battle Group does. And at first I was like, huh? But I think there's a reason for that. Like right here. One of the things that you're able to do, if you want to, is keep playing your battle tokens. You only get so many battle tokens, but I should say your action tokens, your activation tokens. Keep playing those on the same vehicle over and over again. The only problem there is you have to roll a dice that exceeds the number of times that you have already activated that unit, plus any morale penalties that it's taken. So if I have you could technically do it. It's kind of cheesy, I think, but you could technically do it depending on how much you want to push your luck. Is build a cheap list, put a couple really powerful units in there, and then fill it out with fluff or whatever. Just especially on defense, fill up the board with infantry and artillery and minefields and God knows what else, and just have like a small Superman platoon of M1s or something, or Leopard 2s or Charlie 2s, and just activate the hell out of those guys, man. Just hit them again, hit them again. One unit can take up to 6 turns if it wants. The problem is you have to keep rolling higher than the number of activations you've already used on that counter, or you've already used on that unit, and as soon as you fail, well, you've lost that unit. So now you've lost not lost the unit, sorry. You've lost that command token. So there's a little bit of a push your luck on that, it feels like. At the same time, it makes the game a little bit less predictable, which, again, given the small scale of the battle, not like the scale of the miniatures, the size of the battle, given the small scale of the battle, I think that's pretty cool. So, again, I won't keep belaboring the point, but as I'm reading through the book, I'm seeing more and more examples of how the system is going to be very fluid, and how it's kind of like it's always your turn, or it always could be your turn at any second. This is not like, a big game of Panzer Leader where you set up your game, once the other guy's turn, you can go, okay, I'm going to go to the bathroom, I'm going to go make a pot of coffee, I'm going to go get some pizza. First of all, even in Panzer Leader, you can never do that. Big turn-based strategy games get a bad rap for that. Those are poorly designed turn-based strategy games. Trust me, if you play Panzer Leader a couple times, you're going to learn very quickly. You kill most of the enemy's units during his turn. You're going to take more losses yourself during your turn. Any good war game, at least on higher scales, you do all your shooting during the enemy's turn. You only move in your turn. And most games don't let you move and fire at the same turn. That's for higher command levels. Down here, especially with more modern units, with stabilized guns, where tanks can fire on the move, that's great. It totally works. So again, I haven't tried the game yet, but I've played enough games, I've designed enough games, I've published enough games where I can read this, and so far I'm definitely liking what I'm seeing. Okay, here was, I stress was, in fact, before I start this page, let me just check out the chat here. Springtime, it is abstracted and doesn't address those planes specifically. It's too low in command scale. It really is. I don't think a Soviet lieutenant, not a senior lieutenant, not a company commander, a junior lieutenant who commands like a platoon, a Soviet platoon, he's gonna know what the bigger like operational scale plan is up at Army or even worse front or even worse TVD level. He's not gonna know that. So I wouldn't expect it to really address that plane. Unless there's a campaign book out there that I don't know about, which could definitely be the case. Wardrobe also says it lets you do silly things and stick your neck way out there and suffer the consequences. Yeah. Again, I haven't tried it yet, but I'm already reading the rules, and I'm like, yeah, that's a well, we're talking about up here, where you can activate units more than once. That is a push your luck mechanic for your ass right there, especially in list building. If you're list building around this rule, you better have good dice. Because if you don't, things are not going to go well for you. Alright, so let me just get a quick drink because I'm losing my voice. Okay, so as I was thumbing through the book here and I got to movement, I kind of, recoiled just a little bit. The game does fix this later, so I'm not saying anything bad about the game. But once I see rules for movement where all tanks have the same speed, I realize it's a small scale game and so on and so forth. This started to bug me out a little bit. However, it does fix this later on in the system. So we'll talk about this in just a bit. Now here is a rule that I absolutely loved. As soon as Piotr described it to me, I was like, oh, I gotta give this game at least a look. If not an actual play, which I'll be playing this in weeks to come. You guys can bet on that. I'll try it out at least a couple times. I've read rule sets that I thought were going to be awesome and the games weren't that great when you actually tried it, and the reverse is true. When I first read Battle Group, I was like, this is a randomized mess. This is going to be like, clowns with water pistols and bumper cars or whatever. This game is just going to be like this random series of matter, antimatter particles annihilating each other. It's just, no, it really isn't. And that's the difference between reading the rule set and actually trying it out. So far I really like this rule set. This is one of the huge rules why. We'll see how it actually plays on the table. So yeah, infantry proximity. Any vehicle starting with its move within 12 inches of enemy infantry that it's aware of, in other words it's spotted, we'll get into the spotting rules later, without friendly infantry equidistant or closer, can only use move half its normal distance. Unless you're running away. Yeah, this is what I call the Nijmegen rule, or similar rules in other games. Nijmegen referencing, of course, Operation Market Garden, when the British tanks were poised to roll straight to Arnhem, but they couldn't because their infantry were still hung up behind them in Nijmegen. Tanks cannot move into enemy territory, especially built up urban areas. Spoiler alert. All of West Germany is built up and urban, at least to an extent. Suburban, if nothing else. And if it's not that, it's mountains, and if it's not that, it's forest. So, pretty much great hiding places for infantry. You don't move tanks without infantry support, just run over, enemy infantry. It does not work. It doesn't work in any game worth a damn. If you're playing a war game and your tanks can just overrun enemy infantry willy-nilly with very little risk or consequence, you need a new game. I won't belabor the point because we talked about it in last week's podcast, but the history is littered with the charred, burnt-out examples, up to and including Ukraine 2022. Just saying. What happens when unsupported tanks get too close to enemy infantry, and that's before anti-tank guided weapons too. Anti-tank guided weapons haven't helped. Trust me. You guys know this better than me, or at least as well as I do. Then I got to the firing mechanic. Again, I freaked out a little bit when I first saw the firing tables. Not these tables, the actual tables for, what does an M1 need to hit? What does a Challenger need to hit? What does an M60 need to hit? Chieftain, T55. And I saw that all the crappy tanks had high numbers, and all the good tanks had low numbers. And I was like, are the British doing this to us again? Every time a British company comes out with a tank game, American tanks can't shoot for shit. I don't know why. It's an inferiority complex or what? No, dumbass Oriskany. It's a target number you have to roll over. You guys got to remember, I'm used to games that you have to roll low because I come from the 80s as a game designer, player, fan, whatever, critic. I'm used to games where you have to roll low because you have to get under a certain target number. So the lower you roll, the better. Obviously, this is you have to roll higher, so the target number for a better tank is going to be lower. Like I think the M1A1 is a 4+. Earlier, like 4th generation tanks are like a 5+, and some of the real crap out there is a 6. I even saw some 8s in there for like mortars and so on and so forth. So, no worries there. I do like where more area effect weapons have more than one dice. So I'm always a fan of multi-dice systems because you get a little bit of a bell curve in there. I love bell curves. Big time. Because you're not going to roll a 1, you're not going to roll a 10 with equal chance as a 5 or a 6. You know what I mean? I mean, you guys know how bell curves work. 2d6s, 2d10s. I love a lot of bell curves, that's for sure. Alright, so I went too fast there. Okay, there seems to be a bit of a misapprehension out there in our little Sitrep community, and it's probably my fault, that I don't like games that have cards in them, or card mechanics. I really don't mind cards in games. The only reason I have sort of shied away from games that use a lot of cards in the last 2 or 3 years is because between where I live, between where everybody else lives, and then COVID on top of that, there hasn't been any local gaming around here that I've had a heck of a lot of access to. So, I mean, even the closest guy I know, John Sowerby, lives in Hollywood, which is an easy hour away from me under relatively optimal traffic conditions. And he's the closest guy. I game with people in Australia, UK, Canada, Germany, friggin' China sometimes. I'm actually not kidding about that. Literally all over the globe, and you have to do that trash virtually. I can pretty much take any game and kit bash it into a virtual game system in an afternoon. Doesn't take that much work. Drawing cards virtually can be tough. Because even if you can just show a way, you can just port all these into a graphics engine. And you can even have a random statement in Excel drawn for you. The problem is, then the other guy goes to draw a card, he's not drawing from the same deck, because obviously your deck is in your computer, his deck is in his computer. It gets to be a pain in the ass. I know, there's Vassal, there's virtual tabletop. I'm not a fan of those systems. I don't like platforms where you can't write your own rules, or not write your own rules easily. But for an actual tabletop game that I'm trying out in my dining room or down at the club or whatever, cards are fine. So there are some cards in this game. From what I understand, they're optional. But I went through some of the cards, and yeah, they seem like a lot of fun. They add a little bit of extra flavor to the game. It feels like. So here are again. I didn't want to show the whole chart. I don't want to give away anyone else's game. Again, this game you can buy at greatescape.com. It's pretty easy. It's very inexpensive. It's not a big deal, at least in PDF. So I only showed a little bit here of the United States order of battle chart, or I should say unit chart. I didn't even put in any of the ground vehicles. They also give you the United Kingdom, West Germany, Canada, Denmark, Netherlands, and Belgium. So I don't know. Did Team Yankee ever come out with Denmark? I know they came out with NATO, but I don't have that book, so I don't know if Denmark's included in that. Our friend Rasmus might be happy to see that Denmark finally gets into the war, so to speak. I know that other games and other sets have allowed you to play Canadians, West Germans, Dutch, and Belgians. So that's cool. And again, I think even this has been expanded upon. Guys were talking about the Facebook group earlier, where there was a lot more people building their own lists, putting them out there. Again, Israelis, Iraqis, Middle East, stuff like that. So definitely excited about that. Cool. Just making sure we're caught up on comments. All right, one thing that's again, maybe they clean this up in other books or so on and so forth, is they pretty much just present the Soviet Union as the Soviet Union, and this is pretty much Warsaw Pact. I understand that the Soviet Union that the Warsaw Pact was very standardized. You know, pretty much everyone used Soviet gear, so you could theoretically just use one big Soviet list to pretty much do any Warsaw Pact force. Except that's not really true. There's a lot of stuff that even within a Soviet force, you gotta sort of have to watch out for, which to their credit, they do mention here in this text. They talk about category 1, 2, and 3 divisions, and how that's going to be different. We talked about this during the Saturday's podcast, so I won't go over it again. Plus, you guys probably already know all this. You guys got to remember, though, I'm also speaking to people who are going to be watching this later on YouTube. So at no time do I want it to come across like I'm talking down to anybody. But yeah, there's category 1, 2, and 3 formations. Those are going to be very, very different. They're very different lists. So you want to keep an eye out for that. And again, what a Polish tank division would have, what a Czech tank brigade would have, is going to be different. East Germans, it's going to be different, big time. Same basic list, just certain things are going to be off the table for these Category 2 and Category 3 divisions in the Soviet Army, or in supporting Warsaw Pact states. So, one big difference, very happy to see, is, and I know at least a couple people this is going to definitely settle some arguments, is 7 Days to the Rhine, or 7 Days to the River Rhine, has a 4-facet target aspect system. Basically, it's got 4 sides to a vehicle. Some other games have front and flank, and that's all. Which I get for making the game quick and easy, especially when you're playing with a lot of tanks. But it's not accurate. Like, not even close. It seems to use a very, very similar characteristic or mechanic to Battle Group. So you go by the corners of the vehicle and you pretty much just, bisect the vehicle twice. It's not 90 degrees, so the shape of the vehicle does matter. But all in all, yeah. Definitely happy to see this little bit of extra detail in here, a little bit of extra realism. Speaking of realism, we talk about how units seem to take damage. Infantry units seem to take damage. It's not a game of Doom or GTA. It's not you're shooting people and knocking them down like Rambo in an action movie. It's damaging morale of a unit until that unit becomes combat ineffective. There are no individuals in combat. Um, Combat is one of the loneliest experiences that anyone can ever go through. Nevertheless, you're always with somebody. You're always with a group. So even a single tank has a crew of 4. Assuming you're not in a Warsaw Pact tank. There's a crew of 3, but still. It's going to be destroying the morale of a group of men. So I was very happy to see that. We'll see how that goes. They give you like 4 or 5 scenario types, and of course encourage you to make up your own scenarios. So they're not like scenarios like April 12th, 1985, Soviet 12th Guards. No, it's something like, it's like, here are some scenario templates, maybe I should say. That seemed to be very cool. One thing that definitely, had my ears go up when Piotr was talking to me about it is hidden deployment. So, yeah, hidden deployment is a thing. I've been playing with hidden deployment in this setting since literally 1988, or I should say 1985 with GDW Assault. This game is like 50% dummy counters. So, if you guys have seen any of our previous games, I pulled dummy counter mechanics into everything from Panzer Leader to Valor and Victory when we're doing, hidden battles like the Viet Cong or the NVA in Vietnam, stuff like that. I'm very familiar with the general rule template, how that works, and I'm actually really, I've always really liked it. It's a way to approximate hidden movement without having to set up 2 tables, without having to set up a referee, without having, a true double blind game is a real pain in the ass. It's great when you can get one together, but it's not easy. For a bunch of reasons. Number one, you need the same game twice. You need double the miniatures. You need double the terrain. It's hard enough to do in a hex and counter game. I want someone to set up the exact same 8x4 miniature table with the same terrain twice in 2 different rooms in your house, and have it not look like I got a green map board and there's a building here and a hill here and a tree there. No, like a good table. Now do that twice. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's a pain in the ass to do it that way, which you would have to do in a double blind game, in a true double blind game. Or have guys with grease pencils, like writing down their positions, and now guess what? Now you need a grid reference on your table. Congratulations, you might as well be playing a hex and counter game that everybody hates. Because hex and counter games are better. Just kidding, but not really. I'll get off that soapbox though. But in all seriousness, dummy counters are a great way to have it's not really double blind, but it's an approximation of double blind, where there's only one table and you don't need a referee. Another thing about double blind games is, someone has to be the referee. Someone has to go through all the negative parts of running a war game, driving to someone's house, buying pizza or whatever, all the pain in the ass that you go to, getting in the car, dragging all your shit down to the club or whatever it is you're doing, and you don't even get to play. The hell is that? So, I don't know. And one last thing that I really like about dummy counters, or hidden movement or whatever, is here they give you a very basic hidden marker tokens equal to 1.5 times round up your actual number of units. So you have 10 units, you get 50 markers. The enemy doesn't know which ones are real or whatever. That's all great. But here's the thing. With a little bit of creativity and a little bit of forethought, you can have things like, which side has better electronic warfare? Who's winning the battle in space? Yes, I meant that literally. Who's winning the satellite war? Who's got more satellites over Germany on August 12th, 1985? Who's taking better, keyhole satellites of the battlefield? So what you can do is you can give one side or the other more or less dummy counters to reflect these fluctuations in electronic warfare. Radio electronic combat, general C3I intelligence assets, command control communications intelligence, we've all heard the terms. All that old Airland Battle 2000 stuff that is really what games like this are all about. Even if traditions aren't really remembered. Thought I heard somebody coming in behind me. So Springtime says, what is your opinion on having units in a game that aren't meant for battles, like support vehicles, in a game to make it realistic despite them having little or no combat use? Let me unpack that for a second. Make sure I understand the question right. In a historical game, I love it. There are tons of examples where you research a battle in a historical game, Panzer Leader, Valor and Victory, Battle Group, if you want to get down to a really small level, where you know that certain things were there, and it has like no use. It's like, why are these here? Why am I facing a Soviet infantry attack and all I have are German anti-tank guns? Why am I facing a Soviet T-34 charge and all I have are howitzers and mortars? It was what was there historically. You have to make do with what you have. That's for historical, counter, hex and counter kind of games. I don't know if I feel the same way in a game like this, because a game like this has two important differences. Number one, it's miniature based, which means that somebody had to go out, buy, paint, build, store, weather, preserve, everything, all these miniatures, list build this stuff. So they have to spend money on it and time. And even after the miniatures are done, there's a continuing investment in storage space, which sometimes costs money, and everything else. Maintenance, you have to fix tracks, machine guns break off, radio antenna break off. It's weird I feel it's a little weird to require people to have stuff that they don't want. And again, these games are often list driven, which by and large, I'm not a huge list driven fan. I'm not a big tournament guy. I'm much more about a scenario game or a historical game. Now, I know historical doesn't really apply to this, but in a scenario setting, yeah, I think it's great. If the NATO player is trying to defend a ambulance convoy as they're withdrawing from, they're trying to evacuate wounded out of Nuremberg, and the Soviets have operational maneuver groups behind 7th Corps lines, and they're trying to cut us off. So this highway has to be held long enough for this truckload of ambulances to get. That's great narrative. And if you want to build and paint the miniatures that go with that, and have them be like some kind of an objective, like the Soviets get X amount of, or maybe the Soviets don't get points, but the NATO player loses points, which is really the same thing, but there's a slightly different tone there. If the NATO player loses points for each ambulance vehicle that gets destroyed, or something like that, it's a bit of an investment. I feel it's a lot more appropriate to historical, scenario, hex and counter games, where number one, you've got more historical information, and number two, it's a low bar of investment to put what is effectively useless units on the table. Whereas in a miniature setting, someone had to pay like real money for that, especially if it costs real money, obviously, to build and paint the stuff and time. But on top of that, if it costs actual points to put the stuff in your list, that's a steep price to pay for narrative, especially in a purely theoretical setting. So I hope I came close to that. I hope I don't. I hope I didn't completely answer the wrong question there. Jennifer Lemon asks, I take it this is a PDF? Yes, there's a PDF. There is an actual book you can buy, Jen, if you want. I just bought the PDF for now. So Springtime expands on this question. For example, a few Warsaw Pact armies used different rifles from the AK-74, 47-74. Yeah, a lot of Czechoslovakian units used different rifles, and you had different support weapons. Like Romania had its own version of the RPD, I think. Poland had a lot of its own vehicles. The Czech Republic, it wasn't the Czech Republic back then. Czechoslovakia had some of their own self-propelled artillery vehicles. So yeah, you do have other stuff. I don't know if it's useless. I know this game here, it's pretty much just rifles or infantry teams. So you don't get into the super nitty gritty of, oh, this rifle squad is armed with AK-47s, but this one's armed with AK-74s. Yes, there's a difference, as you guys know. M16s versus M14s. Of course, now you're back in the Vietnam era, but anyway, things like that. A more relevant example might be an American M16 squad versus a British SLR squad. Those are two very, very different rifles. Like they're not even both assault rifles. SLR, I think they classify it as a battle rifle. So those might have different game values. In fact, in Valor and Victory they do, but in a game like this, it doesn't seem like they really do. Again, like I talked about earlier, it's strictly a infantry team, support team, light vehicle, heavy vehicle, and then with a little bit of stuff sprinkled on top. Obviously helicopters and probably off-board artillery. And that's pretty much where we wound up, guys. Again, I haven't really read this book yet in detail. The stream, I wasn't expecting it really to go past an hour. We're right about an hour now, so for once I actually landed right on the mark. So yeah. I've talked a lot about this game, which I feel like maybe I shouldn't because I haven't read it. Or even much less played it yet. But I guess what I'm saying is, don't be surprised if you see this on our tables or videos of gameplay on this very, very shortly. Like maybe even as early as next week. We do have other plans for Sunday coming up, but maybe on Wednesday I'll have like a table built, and maybe by next weekend. So that would be as early as, let's see, it might be as early as like August 7th. We might actually have this on the table. I don't know if I can live stream it. I've live streamed miniature games before. We had that Trenton game. That didn't do that well in viewership, but I think it's because it was American Revolution. American Revolution, I love, but our audience doesn't. Every time I put American Revolution up on our channel, it's kind of a stinker. Whether it's a miniatures game, hex and counter game, it's I don't know what your problem is, Sitrep community. I don't know what's up with the hate for the American Revolution. I think it's the perfect black powder setting. Not as huge as American Civil War, not as huge as Napoleonics still has. The colors of Napoleonics, anyway, a lot more skirmish system. I mean, people don't like the American Revolution, and yet they flock to play Sharp's Practice, which is the one part of the Napoleonics Wars that's kind of like the American Revolution. The whole Iberian campaign in Spain, so Spain and Portugal, whatever. It can be tough to film, says Jennifer Lemon. Not very dramatic unless you get multiple camera angles. Yeah, well, let's see what we can do. If nothing else, our recordings, they're just a shit ton of work. But our recordings of miniature games, all through our Go For project, those did great. And I have much better video editing software now than I had back then. That was almost a year and a half ago. So, yeah. At least, I know this is a very selfish sort of a perspective, but at least for this guy, Oriskany Jim, I have a ton of 50mm modern or modern-ish miniatures, and just because of my personal predilections and quirks and likes and dislikes, I've never been that jazzed about really getting into the nitty-gritty of Team Yankee. I've got Team Yankee rulebook, it's right over there. I've even got a couple of supplements. It's just never really clicked with me. I have massive respect for what Team Yankee has done for the gaming community. I love how it sort of was the soft launch of V4 Flames of War, which, spoiler alert, it was. I love where they took Fate of a Nation and made it no longer a World War II Flames of War sequel, and instead made it a World War III Team Yankee prequel sort of a thing, especially when they brought in the 73 War. And now with Oil Wars, although I won't get on the soapbox, but that name always drives me crazy. we're going to have oil wars. We're going to call it oil wars. We're going to give you Merkavas and Syrian T-72s, because that's what the war in Lebanon was all about. It was about oil. Sorry. But again, I've always sort of needed a system. And there's been other, again, I tried Battle Group, bringing it forward through the decades. That works to a point. Team Yankee is a great game to a point. I've even been waiting, I was even willing to wait for Centag to a point. But with this, it seems to tick a lot of the right boxes. There are a couple things that might, like, Wardrobe Plays World War II was mentioning a lot of abstraction. If there's a lot of the whole game is only, like 20 pages? Like 30 pages. The rest of the book is cards and unit lists and scenario types. The actual rules, it's not that much to it. But that's what I'm looking for. If I want crunchy, badass, you gotta break out a calculator and a slide rule and, really drill down into the rivets. Dude, I got Panzerleader for that. I've got this bad boy for that. This game blows Panzerleader out of the water when it comes to tactical realism and technical accuracy. Or hell, if I really get psychotic, I can always break out a main battle tank. I mean, you want to talk about a game that'll give you a fucking brain tumor. This fucking thing. Good God. Even for me, you guys know what kind of games I like, and even that one's a touch much for me. But the point is, if I really want to get down into, APFSDU, fin stabilized, that struck the turret face at a 72-degree angle, not a 71-degree angle. I'm not exaggerating. That goes on a different chart there, so we're going to have to go ahead and figure out what, if you're into that stuff, there are other games for it. When I sit down and I want to play with miniatures, I've already let the rivet counter ship has already sailed. Which, I wear that badge with pride. There's a part of me that is 100% dyed in the wool friggin' rivet counter. Sorry, I don't apologize for that. Especially when it comes down to historical accuracy. But that's for a different kind of a game format. When I want to sit down and just have a lot of fun with a relatively light, breezy system that is light, but not silly. Simple, but not like just dumb or shallow. This game seems to get a lot of things right. With a few little special rules in there, it throws in there. I mentioned earlier, it kind of weirded me out when I saw that some of the tanks all had the same speed. Some of the tanks do have special abilities where they move at an extra fast speed, and I'm like, okay, all the tanks basically don't have the same speed. Okay, all the tanks basically have 2 speeds. Well, yeah. Tanks in the Cold War basically have 2 speeds. Sorry if you didn't know that. You don't have to get into the individual miles an hour. But there are basically 30-mile-an-hour tanks and 45-mile-an-hour tanks. Or really like 35 and 42, or something like that. It's not that big a deal. The entirety of World War III would basically be fought by 2 tank guns. It's not like World War II where you have every friggin' size of millimeter and caliber and gauge and the NATO 120, which I understand there are British rifles and German speed wars. But basically, the NATO 120 and the Soviet 125. Boom. All of World War III is going to be basically fought by 2 tank guns. Okay, then you add anti-tank missiles in there. There's like 17 different varieties of that. But there's a lot of World War III that would have been deceptively simple. So just because a game only has like 30-page rulebook and seems to have a little bit of abstraction in it, I don't think that makes it a bad thing. Especially if those rules are well written, which this seems to be. It's a great quick reference sheet. There's frequently asked question sheets, and the community is up and alive and alert and running and creating and expanding this game. The grass is still growing under its feet, so to speak. So you have nothing to. It's by no means a dead system. So any flaws that the game might have, I'm not even saying that it does, but any shortcomings that the game does have, they're either going to fix, the community's going to fix it, or you can fix it. And you can fix it because the base system is well designed and stable and simple enough to where you can add your own complications or permutations onto it and not have the whole thing collapse in on itself like a house of cards. Because there are games that you can house rule and there are games that you can't. So even if you do find something in this game that you genuinely don't like, you can fix it and the system will not implode upon itself because it's already too complicated. Because let's face it, house rules are usually not the most usually not the best designed thing because it's just some guy in the middle of a game made up a rule. It's usually played in a live game before it's ever play tested, or much less written down. It's easy enough to come up with a new rule. Now show me how that rule interacts with all the other rules. If that other rule book is already that thick and comes with a migraine like baked into it, you're going to have problems. If the game system is already manageable, any holes that you personally find in the system, if you don't personally like it, you can spackle it in with your house rule, and it won't be a problem because the game is not overly emburdened already. Okay, so checking the comments one more time. Maybe a little slideshow with some narration and music. Those always came out great. We had like video clips. I don't know if we ever had slideshows of tabletop games, but no worries. Yeah, something pretty easy. We'll try it out. I definitely want to try this game out on the table because my living room my dining room is a certain size. I can really only go to 6x5 maybe. I have literally a 6x5 table, so a smaller game of 3 to 5 vehicles on one side, maybe double that on the other side, is just about perfect for me. And if it's simple and easy to learn, because the whole game would be brand new to me, I think it would be a great fit. And it would give me a chance to use all my 15mm miniatures from Battlefront, which are awesome and worth every friggin' penny. So even if you don't like the Team Yankee system, buy their miniatures, because their miniatures are epic. I should also note that no one has paid me to say any of this stuff, either Great Escape Games or Battlefront Miniatures. Their miniatures are awesome. Their Great Escape Games system seems to be awesome. I'll have to definitely check it out. It comes highly recommended by some guys I really trust in the gaming circuit, so to speak. And now that I've gone through and skimmed through the rules, what I see so far, I definitely like, with pretty much no exceptions. There were a couple times I thought I found an exception. I did, with the little bit of skimming I did do with this, I did with a hard eye. I was like, I know I don't have time to read the whole book with a ruler and a magnifying glass, but let me go through these rules and see if I can actually find something wrong. And I thought I did find it a couple times, and then you flip 3 or 4 more pages long, it's like, oh, never mind. Here's a little thing that fixes that, or that explains that. So, awesome. This is not a sponsored video, although it should be. I don't know, I mean, I know a lot of times, and I know this is true, because other members of the Sitrep podcast team call me out on it, and they call me out on it when I'm not on camera and I can't defend myself. They think I hate Team Yankee, and they think I always shit on Team Yankee. I've played Team Yankee. I've got huge Team Yankee armies and 3 friggin' factions. 4. Iraqis, United States, Soviets, and Germans. I own 4 big Team Yankee armies. Battlefront's gotten plenty of my money. They're going to get more, trust me. I'm thinking about Israelis now. I want to expand my, now that I'm out of my American Army, Desert Storm is done, I got to go out and buy Iraqi T-72s. I got plenty of T-72s, but they're all Soviets. They're in the wrong colors. So, but Team Yankee, the whole Flames of War, and WoW is version 4 better than version 3. There's a lot of version 3 fans out there that go into conniptions every time I say that. I'm so sorry, your game was broken. And you know who agreed with me? Friggin' Battlefront. You know how I can tell? They got version 3, they took it behind the woodshed, they put a chokehold on that son of a bitch, and they took a flamethrower to it until it was 1/10 its previous size. and they said, let's take a look at what works and what doesn't work, and let's jettison all this junk. That was a system, I swear to God, it was a victim of its own success. It was so successful and so many people liked it, which is great, don't get me wrong. They kept coming out with books for it, they kept coming out with new units for it, and more special rules, more special rules, more special rules. Dude, you might as well be playing 40k at this point. Where you have like 16 books, and if you don't have that 17th book, you just got the shit kicked out of you on the table. It was getting there. It was getting there. And it was getting there where you could just like cite a certain rule in the book and say, I'm doing this. Like infiltrate, or spearhead, or stormtrooper move. Like, no, dude. If you want to use that tactic in the game, here are your forces, here's the table, you do it. You infiltrate, you outflank, you reconnaissance, you Patton. Oh, why is Patton a battlefield asset on a company level game? Or at the most a battalion level game? Someone's gonna have to explain that to me one of these days. I know it sounds like I'm shitting on Flames of War, but I'm not. I'm building up to a huge plus for Flames of War. They took a lot of that stuff out. In fact, almost all of it out. They paused, they took a step back, they said, this is what works, this is what doesn't work. It overgrew like a box of weeds. Let's go through it and let's take a hard, objective look. Let's not keep things just because people like them. Let's not keep things just because we thought they were cool at the time. Let's actually look at what makes a clean, streamlined, smooth, fast, efficient system. A game, we all like games that are fun, but at the end of the day, the game has to be a system. You want to design software, you want to design a business process, you want to design a game. I'm in all those fields, guys. It's all the same process. It's got to be an efficient, smooth process. The fun will come later. But if your game is a clunky, cumbersome, exception-ridden, loophole, logic loop, or logic circle, whatever you want to call it, riddled mess, it's not going to be fun no matter what. So, alright, I've ranted about that a long time. So, yeah, Flames of War, version 4 fixed a lot of that, and that's kind of where Team Yankee is in a lot of ways. I remember the days. It was like, what, October 2015, November 2015 was when the very first releases of Team Yankee were first dropping. And Flames of War V4 was March of 2017. So it followed almost immediately, like a year, basically a year later. And I'm pretty sure Team Yankee was like the test balloon for that as a system. And it does work. It works great if you like big battalion level games. I'm looking for a smaller platoon plus company level game, platoon plus company minus. So for a lot of the same reasons, I think I prefer Battle Group to Flames of War. I think I'm going to prefer 7 Days to the River Rhine over Team Yankee. That said, this just makes me go out and buy a shit ton more Team Yankee miniatures, because Battlefront Miniatures are epic. Alright guys, I probably lost my entire audience now. But this is Oriskany Jim. Yeah, we're pretty much done for today. We just wanted to talk about this new system for a few minutes. So we're taking off now. I'm going to log off and I think go to bed, because I've gotten like 6 hours of sleep in the last 2 days. Or 2 nights, I should say. 3 days, really. Yeah. So we are rounds complete, everybody. Tango Mike for listening. This is Oriskany Jim for the Sitrep podcast. Keep an eye out for some more live content on Sunday, and we're also going to have more content ready for you next week. But for now, Oriskany Jim signing off. Tango Mike for listening. We'll be in touch very soon. Take care, everybody.